many of us would have visited Kalugumalai and seen these repetitive, indistinguishable figures of multiple Tirthankaras or Jain gods, we'll call them for the time being, all across the mountain, all over the mountain. Or many of us may also remember Bahubali, the giant statue of Gomateshwara at Shravanabelagola, and that sort of stands out in our mind as Jainism. Some of us may have actually wandered into a Jain temple, a contemporary Jain temple, and seen, very colorful icons and images of Jain divinities, and mostly made of white marble, and we may remember some of these as well. If we have gone to some of the Jain temples in North India and so on, we will also find lots of fancy structures, clusters of shrines and things like that. This is, for example, something like this in one of the shrines. Or you may find a number of clusters of Jaina idols put in there and so on. So what is all this? So this talk is about explaining some of all of this and what the Jains, who and what the Jains worship. Already when the announcement was made, people had asked me, is it about Jain rituals because it says worship? No, it's not. Is it about Jain temples and monuments? It's also not about that. So we're not going to Mount Abu or anywhere and seeing fabulous, Gurjara Pratihara architecture and so on. It is more about the evolution and the history of Jain worship. And for a religion that does not believe in a quote unquote God, who are Jain gods and goddesses? How did they evolve, and what is their iconography? A couple of caveats. One, this is an introduction for non-Jains by a non-Jain. And secondly, I'm an enthusiast, not an expert. So if experts and Jains are watching, they will know much of this is basic, and I would seek their blessings and apologies if I make any errors in this. So let's go. There are a number of articles and books and things like that you can refer. One I would recommend handily is the jainpedia.com, which is a wonderful resource of everything Jain, and you can go through it. It's very well written by Nalini Malbir, and you can go through it over a over a month or a year at your leisure. It's wonderfully structured as well. Okay, so this is the symbol of Jainism today. And many of us would have seen it in sometimes when Jains give their visiting cards, or there is a greeting card, or behind the the cashier of a Jain-owned store, you will find this symbol, and it says Parasparopagraho Jivanam at the bottom. So what is this symbol? A simple Wikipedia search will show you that this is what the symbol stands for. Starting at the bottom, the text means mutual assistance of all beings. And then there is this hand. The hand stands for the teachings of the Tirthankaras, and there may be a better version here. And you can read Ahimsa written here, the word Ahimsa. So it stands for non-violence and for the teaching of the Tirthankaras. And then there is this swastika, which divides everything into four, and essentially to show that there are four types of beings in the Jain scheme of things. There are heavenly beings, there are humans, there are subhumans, animals, and there are hellish beings. And these beings, by these three dots of right faith, right conduct, and right knowledge, can attain liberation. The path to liberation for these beings is through these three dots, and then you reach this top semicircle here, or a crescent there, which is the abode of the liberated soul, the Siddhaloka. Right. So this is the symbolism of this Jain thinking. And you may think, okay, this looks wonderful. It's quite heavy duty. Succinctly captures everything. So it must be very ancient, 3,000 years old kind of thing. No, it was adopted in 1974. So unless you're a millennial, it's not ancient. To mark in 1974, the Jains marked the 2,500th anniversary of Vardhamana Mahavira attaining liberation. And at that time, they adopted this symbol. So why did we start here? So I explained to you everything that is inside of this shell outside, or the shape outside. But I've not told you what that shape itself stands for. That shape is a very important shape for Jains, especially since this symbol was adopted. And today we have large temples and buildings built by Jains. So you can see one here at Hastinapur, you can see one here at Bagpat, which is about an hour away from Delhi, and so on. So what exactly does this stand for? So in fact, the context of this particular, the one near Hastinapur, is actually this. And there is an even more fabulous structure there. The whole thing looks like Cape Canaveral, and you're sort of waiting for launch of the next SpaceX spacecraft. But what, you can see this fantastic feature here. And this is that shape that we just saw in the symbol of Jainism. So the same Wikipedia will tell you that this is what the symbol stands for. It basically divides the Jain view of the universe. The universe is divided into three. There is the lower, what they call Narkaloka or Adholoka. There is a small middle level here, and then there is the upper level of all the heavens, right? And then, of course, the top crescent stands for the Siddhashila, or the abode of the liberated beings. So that still doesn't explain why this shape, right? This triangle here and so on. And that comes from the concept of the Lokapurusha. So the Lokapurusha should be imagined, somebody standing with arms akimbo, with maybe feet a little wide apart. And then this is something that has been featuring in Jain art for centuries now. These are 17th century paintings. And the entire universe is depicted as the Lokapurusha in this form, right? So this is the lower world, this is the upper world, and the circle here is really the cross-section of the Madhyaloka. The Madhyaloka is such a thin sliver that this is a cross-section of the Madhyaloka. It's very colorful. And the other thing that you see, it has lots of little details in it, and we'll figure out why they have so much detail in describing this, in depicting Lokapurusha, right? So here is a more detailed version of what this is. So essentially, the Jain world of the universe looks at what is known as Adholoka, which is the 7 layers of hells, right? This is actually the largest part of the universe in the Jain scheme of things. And then there is a small middle world, which is known as Madhyaloka. And then there is an upper world, which is the Urdhvaloka, which has 14 layers of heavens, right? And so now this is not new. I don't know if this is, this is not completely unique to Jainism. The Hindu cosmology also has the Triloka concept, and we talk of these multiple layers of heavens, Bhu, Bhuvar, Swar, Maha, Jana, Tapa, and so on, Satyaloka, and so on. So it's a shared heritage as far as the cosmology goes, that there are multiple layers of Patalam and multiple layers of heavens, and there is this thin middle world that is there. However, the Jain scheme of the universe and cosmology is distinctive in many ways, and we'll see what those are. So if you take this middle layer here, this middle layer, Madhyaloka, and that Madhyaloka, which is shown normally, as I said, in a cross-section in that Purushaloka pictures, consists of this. There are 3 continents in the middle here. There are several continents, there are 8 continents, and there are oceans in between dividing these continents, right? So the middlemost continent is Jambudvipa. And 1 minute, I can just go to that. Yeah, the middlemost continent is Jambudvipa, and then that is separated from the next continent called Dataki Dvipa by a Lavana ocean of salt, and then is the Kalodadi ocean, and then there is Pushkara Dvipa. Human beings can be born only in Jambudvipa, in Dataki Dvipa, and 1/2 of Pushkara Dvipa. So this 2.5 is what is known as the Adhai Dvipa in the language of the Jains, and it is only here that is fit for human beings, right? There is also a huge Nandishwar Dvipa, which is the 8th continent outside of all this, and this is where you have what are known as the Shashvata Jinas. They are permanent Jinas, or permanent Tirthankaras, who have 52 eternal temples on this Dvipa, and all the gods and the devas come here for a festival in a year, 2-3 times a year, to celebrate certain events, important events, among them being the Janmabhisheka of the Jaina himself. So this is Nandishwara Dvipa. So this is the Madhyaloka as a whole, but the Jain scheme of things is, as I said, in great detail, right? So therefore, we now take Jambudvipa and we move on and make a further section, and then we look at just Jambudvipa alone. And in Jambudvipa, we see that the southernmost part is called Bharata, which is the continent that and the country in which we live. There is a corresponding country called Airavata, which is in the northernmost part, and that is the it is almost a carbon copy of Bharata, and in the middle is Mount Meru. And then you have the Dataki continent and the Pushkara continent and so on, right? So the Dataki continent has 2 Bharatas and 2 Airavatas and 2 Merus. Then the Pushkara Dvipa again has 2 Bharatas, 2 Airavatas and so on. So totally there are 5 Merus in the scheme of things. Meru is the mountain in the middle of the continent. So that is the scheme of things of. Meru is often in Jaina art represented having multiple layers, and at the topmost layer there is actually a temple to the Jinas, and we will see what that one of the functions of the temple at the top of Mount Meru. Jaina art, because of the intricate detail that with which all these layers are, all these continents are described, Jaina art also faithfully reflects them. And these are again mostly 17th, 18th century art in great detail. These are the 2.5 continents, the Jambudvipa in the middle, and then the other 2 continents here. So now you will know what this is. This is Jambudvipa with Mount Meru in the middle and all those elaborate sections that we saw here. All of these regions all shown here, right? So the world of Jain worship today includes the depiction of the universe. What used to be on art earlier is now in 3-dimensional glory. And then you can actually visit Jambudvipa and Mount Meru and so on. And this is how it looks. It says Sumeru because it's the prime Meru of the 5 Meru. Sumeru is the main Meru. Okay. We also saw the 8th continent, Nandishwara Dvipa, and this is often represented again in terms of plaques, in terms of art, and so on. And essentially, we said there are 52 temples to the permanent Jinas, or the Shashvata Jinas, and these are the 52, right? So there are 13 in each direction. In each direction, this Jina faces all 4 sides, and therefore that makes it 52. 13 into 4 is then this makes it 52. So that is what this is all about. So this is the Nandishwara Digambar Jain temple in Madhya Pradesh, and you see these clusters of in each direction there are 13 of them into 4, the 52 eternal Jinas that are being worshipped. So in modern Jain temples, these are given a significant amount of space for worship. So you can actually visit Nandishwara Dvipa, even though as a human being you are not under ordinary circumstances permitted to go there because you can't. That's not where you can be born and live, right? Okay, so the Jaina cosmos therefore is highly structured, and that structure comes out of symmetry and repetition. And if I may use the word in a positive sense, it has excruciating detail. Every length, the number of trees, the number of the height of people, everything is described to the last T, and there's an enormous amount of detail with which the cosmos is described. But what is the purpose of this, all these divisions of hells and central and so on and so forth, is because in the Jains, then in the Jaina philosophy, you then divide all beings based on the karma that they have, and then they are born in one or more of one of these layers of hells or layers of heavens, or in Madhyaloka, based on that. So at the lowermost zone, we said in the Adholoka, we said there are 7 hells where there are hellish beings. Then uppermost hell of the 7 hells are where we have Bhavanavasis. We'll come to who they are. And then in the middle world, we have Vyantaras. We'll again come and see who they are. They are typically celestial beings, right? We have Yakshas and Kinnaras and so on. And this is also where the sun, moon, and the planets, the astros, the Jyotishkas also live here. And of course, humans, plants, and animals. And then there is an upper world, which is the 14 heavens, where we have Vaimanikas, people with Vimanas, we have Anuttaras, and so on and so forth. Now, important to note, a person, a being, a soul can be born in any of these layers. It is not a sequential progression. You don't go from 7th hell to 6th hell to 5th hell and all the way up to the Siddhaloka. Depending on your on the karma that you have earned in your life, then your next rebirth could be in any of these places depending on the karma, right? 2. just because the beings in heaven are better off than the beings in hell. They live in greater comfort, they have vimanas and things like that, but they are not any closer to their liberated soul. Why? Because the only way to get liberation is to be born as a human being. In the Jaina scheme of things, unless you're born as a human, you don't have a shot at liberation, however much of comfort you may have it. So you could be here and earn bad karma and go right there, or you could be here, earn good karma and go there. But whichever thing you do, eventually, if you have to reach Siddhashila and aim for a Tirthankara hood, then the only way is to be born as a human in the Madhyaloka, and that too in those 2.5 continents that we described, right? Now, question: how do we communicate something as complicated as this, something as detailed as this, to a lay person, right? And the answer is a very 21st century one. You gamify it, right? And then that's what you have. So you have what we call snakes and ladders, or Paramapada Sobana Padam in here in Tamil Nadu, right? So these are your karmas that can pull you down to various layers of hell. These are your ladders that can take you up there, and there is only one way to go to liberation, and that is this. If you come here through the human route, you can apply for liberation, right? Why is this important? Because this is what, with this complicated scheme of things, what is it that the Jain acharyas or philosophers are conveying? They are saying, look, the universe is infinite practically, right? There are a million ways in which you can be born. You can be hundreds of different types of souls. You can suffer in so many places, but you have been born in a rare occasion on earth as a human being, and gives you the only shot at liberation. So given this rare life that you have, please make full use of it to try and attain liberation and moksha, nirvana. So that is the message that the entire scheme of things leaves, and that is conveyed through this. Incidentally, there are some indications that the game that the British took back, many of the British visitors to India took back, that eventually became snakes and ladders and chutes and ladders and so on, must have been a Jain version, though the same version exists in Hinduism and others, because of its colorfulness and because of the fixed number of 81 squares in the square and so on. Right. So we saw all those classification of souls. So we quickly go through some org charts on that. So all souls are divided into two: perfect souls and mundane souls. Right. The perfect souls are only two categories: the Tirthankaras and the Samanya Siddhas. So Samanya Siddhas are people who have attained Siddhahood or perfection, but instead of working to help liberate other human beings, they stay perfect by themselves. So they are not out there to help out the other human beings to attain liberation. The mundane, we saw this fourfold division. It's there in the symbol of Jainism: human, subhuman or animal, hellish and celestial, right? Now, humans are further divided into ascetics and non-ascetic. The ascetics are various classes. There is sadhus, upadhyayas or teachers, acharyas, and then you become an arhat. An arhat, by a certain process of setting up the sangha and doing samavasarana and so on, becomes a Tirthankara eventually and becomes a perfect Siddha. So a Siddha is a human who has transcended humanness and become perfect. And this is the route to that. The non-ascetic are further divided into ordinary people, that's you and me, and great souls, right? So who are these great souls? We'll come to say we've seen the ascetic. Let's look at the great souls. As I said, the Jaina view is always in great detail. They make lovely lists. So the great souls include 12 Chakravartis, 9 Narayanas, 9 Pratinarayanas, 9 Baladevas, etc., etc., etc. And these 63 types of souls, the 24 Tirthankaras and these 4, together form what are known as the 63 Shalaka Purushas. And Shalaka Purushas are enlightened and superior souls who are worshipped by the Jinas, by the Jains. So who are these people? You can see the Chakravartis are kings who lived during the times of the Tirthankaras. It starts with Bharata, who was the first Chakravarti. He was the son of the first Tirthankara, Rishabhadeva. And then there are the Narayanas or Vasudevas. And then there are the Pratinarayanas and Vasudevas who are opposed to the Narayanas. So you have Krishna here, who is son of Vasudeva and Devaki, and opposed to him is Jarasandha. You have Narayana, opposed to him is Ravana, and so on. Then you have the Baladevas, of whom Rama is one. And then you have several Manus, of whom the last is Nabi Maharaja. And the Nabi Maharaja was the father of Rishabhadeva, the first Tirthankara. As you can see, almost all characters of Hindu Puranas and Hindu stories, especially Vaishnava Puranas, all find a place in the Jaina universe of things, in the Jaina arrangement of souls. Right? But they are all devas, they are all celestial beings. They are not near, they are in the scheme of things, they are much below the Tirthankaras. So we have seen humans, we have seen ascetic, non-ascetic, we have seen the great. Now we go to celestial devas. The celestial devas, again, in classical Jain methods, there is a lot of classification, several types of Bhavanavasis, there are several types of Yantaras. So Yantaras, as you can see, are Kinnaras and Kimpurushas and so on, Gandharvas. And then you see Yakshas. We're going to see a bit about Yakshas and Yakshis because they are worshipped a lot more. Then you have the planets. And then you have the Vaimanikas. Of the Vaimanikas, all of these are Indras. Now, the Jains have a total of 100 Indras. Indra simply means king. And of them, the Hindu Indra, which is the Devendra that we call, is an Indra called Saudharma. And Saudharma has important roles to play in the life cycles of the Tirthankaras, and we will see that later. And then there is Ishanendra, there is Mahendra, there is Brahmendra, and so on. So the Vaimanikas have an important role to play and are part of the worship of Jainas, right? So we have Tirthankaras, we have the great souls and the Shalaka Purushas, and then we have celestial devas, all of whom are worshipped by Jainas. So Tirthankaras, ascetics, Shalaka Purushas like Bahubali, Yakshas and Yakshinis, Shruta Devis like Saraswati and Lakshmi, Vidya Devis, and so on. We'll see some of them today as we go along. Having said this, I must quickly, the rest of it is going to be about icon worship, and I must have a quick warning here that not all Jain sects, Sampradayas worship icons. There are a couple of Sampradayas called Sthanakvasis, from the Sampradaya that started with the founder Lonka Shah in the 15th century, and then from them another set broke away called the Therapanthis in the 18th century. And these people do not believe in worship of icons. They believe that the original teachings of Jain do not physical icons, and that is wrong. And therefore, once they broke away from the main Shvetambra or Sampradaya, they then called the other Murti Pujakas. So Murti Pujas today are the mainstream of Shvetambra Jainism and Digambara Jainism, while the Sthanakvasis and Therapanthis are of aniconic worship. We've seen cosmos. Let us look at what is cosmic time. In the Jain scheme of things, the beginning time has no beginning or end. Then how do things get created? All substances are divided into Jiva and Ajiva. These are not created by anybody. They simply exist. These are eternal substances, and the process of creation and destruction is a flux, this change that is happening to Jiva and Ajiva, and how they mix creates the creation. And this creation and destruction takes place in two eras in cosmic time. One is called the Utsarpini, other is called the Avasarpini. And each of this, the Utsarpini is the progressive half of the cycle, progressive in terms of physical and spiritual progress. Avasarpini is regressive in both physical and spiritual progress, right? And these are further divided into 6 segments of time, and each segment, and this HHH, as you see, is author that I was referring his terminology. It says happy, 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 and MMM is miserable, miserable, miserable. So you have grades of happiness going down and misery going up, and then in the reverse cycle of Utsarpini, grades of misery going down and happiness, bliss coming out, right? Increasing, right? So what creates this happiness and misery? Again, it's all very detailed. Each of this has a name. Sushama is the happy, happy, happy one. Dushama is the end, and you have Sushamas and Sushama Dushama in the middle. So what happens is there are Kalpaka Vrikshas, and these Vrikshas provide everything. They provide food, clothes, palaces. These are trees that provide you, pots, pans, household goods, sweets, fruits, music, everything, right? And as progresses, the trees beginning to vanish or diminished, and finally they disappear in the 4th segment, time segment, right? And towards the end of the 3rd segment, you have the first of the Tirthankaras being born and then all 23 remaining Tirthankaras are born in the 4th segment, which is your Dushama Shushama period. And Rishabhadeva, which was the first Tirthankara, was born at the end of this period. Mahavira, who is the last Tirthankara, was born at the end of this period. And no prizes for guessing where we are today. As we look outside, we are in Dushama, a period of sorrow, and things only get worse from here. Just to give you a scale of these things, these are enormous time periods. Like in the Hindu cosmology, time is in zillions of years. These periods are 21,000 years each. So we have another 21,042 and so on, another 84,000 years before the Tirthankaras are born again in these two segments of 4 and 3. The next set of Tirthankaras, the names are already known. The first of them is Padmanabha. And from there are other Tirthankaras who will come and guide humanity to liberation. So, where are we? We have an elaborate defined universe. We have clearly defined beings, places for beings and souls. Only humans can achieve liberation. Humans can be born only in the 2.5 continents of the thin piece of Madhyaloka. It's an eternal, self-sustaining world with 2 cycles, Avasar and Utsarpini, and Tirthankaras appear in each cycle to guide humans to liberation. Okay. Time to look at the Tirthankaras themselves. So, Jain God is to sum up, may appear, Jains don't believe in a God. What is a Jain God? So, Jains do not believe in a God as a creator, sustainer, and a destroyer of the universe. That is not the Jain God. The Jain God is a perfect being, right? And who can become a Jain God? Every living being has the potential to become a Jain God of the perfect being, right? And how? By liberation of the soul, right? And the main purpose of religion itself, of Jainism, is to liberate the soul. So the soul, every being that is there, every living being, Jivatma, has a soul which is endowed with Ananta Darshana, Ananta Jnana, and Ananta Virya. Every one of us has it, but these faculties are suppressed because they are bound by a subtle matter called karma. And this karma results in the cycle of birth and death, which is a commonly shared heritage with the idea with Hindus and Buddhists as well. This bondage results, as we saw, in being born in hellish regions, heavenly regions, and so on. And then finally, we are born as a human. A human has control over his thoughts and actions, and through rigorous austerities can destroy the karma. And once the karma is destroyed, a liberated soul becomes a Jaina or an Arhat or a Kevalan because he gets Kaivalya Jnana. And when that Jaina or Kevalan organizes what is known as the fourfold Sangha, that is laymen and laywomen, monks and male and female monks, then he becomes a Tirthankara, and that is how a Tirthankara is created. Remember, Tirthankaras are first humans and then liberated souls. So the word Tirtha means a ford, a shallow part of a body of water that can be crossed. The Tirthankara is one who has made this crossing. One is the maker of the ford, or made the passage across from the world of illusion and samsara to the world of Siddha. Right? The most famous Tirthankara, as we all know, is Vardhamana Mahavira, who, as I've already explained, is the last of the Tirthankara. We tend to think of him as the founder of Jainism, but in the Jain scheme, he is the last of the Tirthankaras of the current Avasarpini age, right, of this era. Right? So who was the first Tirthankara then? It was Rishabhadeva or Adinatha. Right? But because Vardhamana Mahavira was a historical figure, and because the early Europeans, with their idea of a founder of a religion, were looking for a founder, we sort of stay with the idea of Mahavira as the founder of Jainism. So there are 24 Tirthankaras who were born in this Avasarpini era. 5 of them will probably, will be the most popular in terms of worship, in terms of temples and so on. This is Rishabhadeva or Adinatha. Then there is Shantinatha, who is the 16th Tirthankara. And then there is Neminatha and Arishtanemi, who is a cousin of Krishna and Balarama. Then there is Parshvanatha, who is who's in some cases sort of considered a historical figure about 250 years before Mahavira. And then there is, of course, Vardhamana himself. Right? So this is the complete list. And as I mentioned, these are 24 of the current era. So how do you depict in an image a Tirthankara? There are only 2 ways, as many of you may know, and both ways are in meditation. Right? So This posture is called Kayotsarga. Kaya's body, Utsarga is to renounce the body. So the Jaina is standing in absolute stillness, quiet, tranquility, without any action, without any desires, right? And his hands hang loose with the sides. And if it's a Digambara version, he is nude. If he is clothed, he is Svetambara, Shvetambara, Sampradaya. So this is one way of depicting the Tirthankaras. The other way is also on meditation, but except instead of standing in meditation, he is seated in meditation in what is known as the Paryankasana and the Padmasana, and his hands are in Dhyana Mudra. Right? So there are only two ways to show the Tirthankara, either as in Kayotsarga in standing, or in Padmasana or Paryankasana in seating. Now, this is something that is shared with Buddhism, where you can see Buddha also seated in Paryankasana in Dhyana Mudra. However, in Buddhism, a little bit of action is allowed to the Buddha. So he can be in Abhaya Mudra and dispel the fears of his devotees. He can be in Varda Mudra and he can provide boons to his devotees. He can be in Bhumisparsha Mudra or Bhusparsha Mudra, where he calls the Mother Earth in witness against in his battle against Mara. Or he can be in Dharma Chakra Pravartana Mudra, where he is rotating the wheel of Dharma, the wheel of righteousness. So even the Buddha, even though he is also a liberated soul, is allowed in iconography a little bit of action that deals with his devotees. But the Jinas are not given this. They can only be seated or standing in meditation. Well, you then, you would naturally like to compare it with the Hindu deities. And you can see, compared to a Jaina figure, they are all action heroes, right? That's a big difference, because the Jaina is first a human being and then he becomes and goes to Siddhaloka. Whereas our Hindu deities are first live in places like Kailasa or Vaikuntha, and when there is a need, they are brought down to earth in the form of an avatara or in some other through some Puranas, and they perform heroic deeds before returning to Vaikuntha and Kailasa and so on. So we capture them in our deities. The sculptures, the art captures them in action when they were here on earth. Either destroying evil or dispelling ignorance and so on and so forth, right? Whereas in the case of the Jinas, the highest level that they can attain is a level of enlightenment, total peace, total tranquility, lack of action, and lack of desire. All right? They're called Vitaragis. Raga means desire, Saraga means with desire, Vitaraga means without desire, and Vitaragi, one without desire. So Vitaragi Jaina is the way that Jains are depicted. So it's almost as if it is perfection that is depicted here, and almost what you may call nothingness. So there was, for instance, a way of worshipping the Jinas in this form as well. It's called the Siddha Pratima, the Pratima or the perfect image, and where you worship not so much a divine presence as a divine absence. And this Pratima is just emptiness, right? But of course, it didn't catch on as a big way. It is now used as a kind of yantra. But otherwise, this is one way that the Jinas were depicted at some point in time in the past. So that brings us to the question that if Hindu gods and goddesses had many stories about them, which were then, don't the Jinas and the Tirthankaras have any stories? Yeah, they do. First of all, they all have previous lives. Then their last life is that of a Tirthankara, as you can imagine. They are all born only in Kshatriya royal families. In the case of Mahavira, one of the traditions believes that Mahavira's embryo was first created in a Brahmin woman and then it had to be transferred to a Kshatriya woman. And then 22 of them were born in the race of Ikshvaku and 2 of them from the Harivamsha race. So these are the background. And then they go through a templated life cycle. So it is the same 5 Kalyanakas or 5 stages of life of a Tirthankara that are celebrated by all Tirthankaras. All Jinas have the exact same sequence of events. The details changes, the names of their parents changes, the names of their Indras changes, the names of many circumstances and the land in which they are born changes. But otherwise, it is the exact same. So what are these? These are conception. which is normally represented through 14 or 16 dreams, depending on whether you are Shvetambara or Digambara. The miracles are ascribed to the mother during the pregnancy. She is able to do miracles. And then the Jina is born. Then the Indras, you remember I talked of Saudharmendra, he comes and takes the baby to Meru mountain to perform the Janmabhishega. And then eventually he's crowned king. He's in a Kshatriya family. And then at some point in time, he's reminded by the Devas, by the Indras, that it's time to, that he is born for a certain purpose and it's time to go for renunciation and Diksha. And in renunciation, there are a couple of stages, including one of Charya, where you go out and beg for your basic food. And then, of course, eventually you destroy all your karma and the Jina becomes Kevalan and then performs the Samavasarana, after which he becomes a Tirthankara. Now, all of these are indeed represented in art. So, for instance, here we have Rishabhadeva's mother having the dreams. She then she relates the dreams. The dreams are then narrated and they are explained as to what it means, and she becomes aware that the child is special. And then she gives birth to the child. The child is removed by Indra's wife Sachi, and she hands it over to Saudharmendra here, who then takes the baby to Mount Meru. Remember the temple I told you at the top of Mount Meru, and that is where the Janmabhishega is done. And Mount Meru has these 4 layers, with the temple at the top. The Janmabhishega is done there, and the 2 Indras pour the anointment water on the baby, and then Airavata carries the baby back. And then in the case of Rishabhadeva, he is crowned. He is called Trailokyanatha, and then these are his governors and so on. And then life goes on. He rules the country, but it's time for him to take Diksha. And typically there are events that are organized by the Indras. In this case, it is an interesting event. They are sent a young dancer, a very beautiful dancer called Nilanjana, and the plan is to have Nilanjana drop dead right in the middle of the dance to remind Rishabhanatha, or as he is before he's taking Diksha, of the ephemeral nature of life, and that it is time for him to take up Diksha. So that's what he does. He goes there. He has to pluck out his own hair with his hands. It's called Loch, and then he takes up Diksha, and all the others return to from the forest back to the kingdom. Then, while in Diksha, he has to go for Charya, and then here is a slightly humorous incident. So he goes for Charya, and when you go for Charya to beg for food, you are not supposed to speak to anyone. So what happens is the kings of the land know he's a great soul, so they bring him lots of gifts: elephants, horses, jewelry, clothes, even dancing women, and so on. The poor man goes back to the forest because that's not what he wants. He has come for food. The next time he comes, he's served the food, and then he goes back to the forest, continues his penance, and eventually under this vriksha. The vriksha is every Jina selects a particular vriksha or a tree under which he does the penance and spends all his karma before attaining liberation. And once he attains liberation, again with the help of the Indras, they go to a grand sermon. The first sermon that the Jaina preaches is called the Samavasarana, which I hope we'll have a little bit of time in the end to figure out what the Samavasarana is, and then he becomes a Tirthankara, right? So all of this is part of the Kalyanakas of Tirthankara and life. However, it's only celebrated in art. Worship is restricted to these 2 stages of liberated soul, of the Siddha, of the Vitaragi Jina only. And therefore, worship is restricted, as I said here. However, there was sometime in the past, maybe in the 6th, 7th centuries, a cult where the Jina was worshipped before he took Diksha, and that was called the Jivantasvami Pratima. Jivantasvami means the living Lord, and there is a very interesting story. And these bronzes that you see here are from a place called Akota near Baroda, and one of them actually has the inscription saying this is the Jivantasvami. And it's exquisite. It's in full regalia. He's a prince. Remember, he's a king. He's in full regalia. He wears a crown. He's got kundalas. He's wearing jewelry, and so on. As late as the 10th and 11th centuries, there were still Jivantaswami idols and sculptures being made. This one is from Jodhpur, from near Jodhpur, in one of the temples there. So the concept of worshipping the Jaina before he took Diksha also existed for some time. And there's a very interesting story there, and that story is again shared with Buddhism, in fact. So there was one Vidyunmali who made an image of Mahavira after actually seeing a contemporary of Mahavira. He actually saw Mahavira in person and made an image out of Chandana. And that he then gifted it to that image to King Udayana, who was also a contemporary of Mahavira. And Udayana and his wife worshipped the image. And once the wife died, Udayana gave the idol to his slave girl Devadatta, who eloped with the idol with her lover Pradyota, who was the king of Ujjain. And so to retrieve the idol, Udayana marched to Ujjain, defeated Pradyota, but the idol would then not come back with Udayana. It remained fixed to where it was. And therefore, Udayana forgave Pradyota and established a temple there. We are not told exactly what happened to the idol, though a subsequent king from the Chaulukyas period, Solankis, there is a story by Hemachandra saying that they went out and did some archaeology in Ujjain and actually retrieved the Jivanta Pratima of Mahavira. The same story of Udayana, Devadatta, etc. Occurs in Buddhism as well. So this is how the Jivantasvami Pratima has its origin is explained in the texts of the 5th and 7th century AD, and that is how it is explained. However, neither the Jivantasvami Pratima in all its regalia nor the Siddha Pratima in its nothingness continued as part of Jain worship. Instead, we have the Vitaragi Jinas here unchanged for several centuries, which brings us to the question of how old is this whole practice of worshipping Jain icons, right? So in the times of Mahavira, what did they worship, right? So there are texts which say Mahavira himself has visited chaityas or temples in various cities. And these chaityas had what are known as ayagapatas, which are stone or metal tablets with religious symbols, just symbols for worship. Now, it so happens that we have an ayagapata and we have several ayagapatas. This is not obviously from the period of Mahavira, which is anywhere between the 5th century and 6th century BC, but this is from Mathura. Mathura, as you know, is an extremely important center in the history of Indian art, of Buddhist art, Jaina art, Hindu art, and so on. And there was one mound called Kankalitila where a whole lot of artifacts have been found, and many of them are now in Lucknow and so on. So this is an ayagapata. This is not from the period of Mahavira, I repeat, this is much later. It's sort of pre-Kanishka, Kushan period, so 1st, 2nd century CE. And even there you can see that there is a figure of a Tirthankara, and there are these 4 auspicious symbols here and 4 of them here called the Ashtamangalas, right? So what are these Ashtamangalas? In this particular case, you have this double fish, you have the book stand, you have a Srivatsa. The Srivatsa is an important symbol in all religions. It's important for Vishnu, as you know. It's important for Hindus, as you know. Vishnu bears it on his chest. It's important for Buddha, as you know. Buddha, you cannot see it on his chest because Buddha icons always have a cloth on top, unlike the Jina icons. And the Jinas, therefore, eventually the Srivatsa became what is known as the Mahapurusha Lakshana and is actually depicted on the body of the Mahaviras and the other Jinas, right? The 8 auspicious symbols, as you can see, I have listed 11, 12, and so on. So why is it 8? Only 8 are used at any given time, but the list keeps changing and is not settled until much later. So now we look at some candidates for the earliest representation of Jinas on stone or metal, and this is a picture I talked to you about, and here are 2 depictions of Rishabhanatha, who is the first Tirthankara. Now, what is this scene? You remember Nilanjana, the dancer who dropped dead in the middle of her performance? Well, this is the Nilanjana scene, and the 2 Rishabhanathas are seen. And where is this? This is in an architrave, again from Mathura. This has been dated to 100 BCE, which means almost the 1st and early 2nd century BC. This is another interesting one. This is called the Lohanipur torso. Lohanipur is somewhere near Patna. And this is for all, in all books written maybe in the last 20 years, but before the last, the 20 years, it is considered the earliest Jaina idol ever because of the polish that you can see there. This is a stone idol, but you can see what is known as the Mauryan polish. What is the Mauryan polish? You can see this. This is the Kalayan capital of Ashoka pillar from Sarnath. You can see the polish, and we still don't know how the Mauryans achieved that polish on stone. It almost looks like ceramic or metal, but it's stone. And because of the Mauryan polish, it was considered to be 3rd century, the period of Mauryan. But there have been other scholars who have said, no, maybe the Mauryans left behind some skill in polish, and therefore it could be 2nd or 1st century BC. But we're still talking of BC, 2nd century BC. More recently, somebody from the Cleveland Museum of Art, a scholar by name of Sonia Quintanilla, has proposed this Parshvanatha idol as something, probably a new candidate as for the earliest Jaina idol. She has dated it to 75 to 100 BCE, though the museum itself and Indian scholars date it much later. Whatever may be the case, by the time of the Kushans, this kind of idol making of Jinas was well established, and we have several idols from Kankalitila and Mathura to show that it was a well established practice for worshipping Jinas, because we have inscriptions to date them. Apart from that, there is also one long inscription, the famous Hathi Gufa inscription, which is in the Kandagiri caves near Bhubaneswar, which is a long inscription, a 17-line inscription. It's an inscription of a king called Kharavela. Kharavela is from the Maha Meghavahana dynasty, and is normally dated between the last decades of the 1st century BC and the first decades of the 1st century CE. And in his inscription, and where he's clearly a Jain because the inscription begins with salutations to the Arhats and Siddhas, in his inscription he says, it talks about all his achievements over several years, and in the 12th year, in line 12 in this, you can see that he says, and he sets up the image of the Jinas of Kalinga, which has been taken away by King Nanda. Now, King Nanda was a Magadhan king who lived probably anywhere between 200 to maybe 250 years before Kharavela. And so obviously Kharavela had, of his time, being a Jain, there was maybe a royal idol of a Jaina that had been taken away, and it had been retrieved along with its riches and so on and so forth. So all these prove that essentially we have clear evidence, inscriptional evidence, we have archaeological evidence, we have sculptural evidence to show that the worship of a human-formed icon of the Jinas and Tirthankaras definitely started by before 1st century BC, and by the time of 2nd, 3rd century BC, it was prolific, and you can find enormous number of evidence for that. So now let's go into the iconography of Tirthankara icons. I may have another maybe 20-30 minutes of material, so bear with me. The go-to guy for iconography in the most succinct form was Vara Mihira, and in his Brihad Samhita, he explains it quite nicely. He says, Ajanu Lamba Bahu, Srivatsanga, Prashanta Murtischa, Digvasas Taruno, Rupavamscha, Karyo Arhatam Devaha. So, Arhatam Devaha, the god of Arhats, should be shown nude. Digvasas. Digvasas means Digambara. Digvasas means wearing clothes of the sky, which essentially means nude or naked. Should be Taruno, which is young, should be beautiful, Rupavamsa, and should have a tranquil expression, Prashanta, and his arms reaching down to the knees. Janu means knee, Lamba means length, Bahu is arms, knee reaching arms, Rajanu Lamba Bahu. So many of you would have heard the term Ajanu Bahu Arkar. So this is what Ajanu Lamba Bahu is. And above all, with a tranquil expression in his breast, should have the auspicious Srivatsa mark. So essentially, the Jaina idol is fairly simply described. This is all that is required of a Tirthankara's idol, right? So, however, in the text, Tirthankara has given several qualities, right? He's got Ananta Darshana, he has a handsome body, he has well-proportioned limbs, and because of his Kaivalya, Kevala Jnana, he has got several, qualities, great qualities. And all of this finally settled down to a list of 8 items that are then taken up in the depiction of the Tirthankara. And these 8 are a Kaivalya Vriksha. Remember, I told you that when the Jaina takes Diksha and goes for penance and austerities, he sits under a particular tree under which he attains liberation. and that is the Kaivalya Vriksha. Then there is a Devadundubi, which is a celestial drum, and then heaven scattering flowers, but you can't show heaven scattering flowers. So you have a Maladhari Vidyadharas. Vidyadharas are flying celestials, one of the Yantra Devas, and they carry flowers, malas. Then there is the 3 umbrellas. Then there is the Bhamandala, which is the halo or the aura. Then there is the Chamaras, which are normally carried by kings. He sits on a Simhasana, and there is Divya Dhvani. Divya Dhvani is the heavenly sound, not so much music, which the Tirthankara, having attained liberation and in the Samavasarana, emanates. Now again, there are differences between Divya Dhvani as how Digambara see it and how Svetambara see it. Digambara see it as a kind of monotone like Om, like the Hindus, whereas the Svetambara see it as a normal voice in which the Tirthankara explains or preaches. Right? The Dharma Chakra is not an Ashtamaha. These 8 are known as the Ashtamaha Pratiharyas. Pratiharyas are auspicious or miracle working kind of meaning. So Ashtamaha Pratiharyas, and these are supposed to go before the Tirthankara wherever he goes, and these are therefore depicted on the Tirthankara. So let us see these images. These are all images of a place called Devgad in Uttar Pradesh near Jhansi, and where there are literally thousands of Jain idols from across about 500 years, and they've all been put together by people in the 20th century, and of course some of them have been looted, but these are all photos. The next few pictures that you see, the pictures are not great, but these are all from that Devgad temple. So we said Kayotsarga, right, just standing, Ajanulamba Bahu, meaning arms coming to the knee. We have seen the Srivatsa. That is all is required to show the Tirthankara. Then come all the other things. You see Devadundubi on top, you see the Trichatra, you see the Maladhari Vidyadharas. The Trichatra is the three umbrellas, and then these Vidyadharas with, and then you see Chamara bearers as well, who are Indra and Upendra in this case. Right? We talked about the Kaivalya Vriksha. It was not there in this, but slowly it starts emerging. This is very clear. The tree is very clearly seen here. But what do you do if you're a sculptor, right? If you're a sculptor, the sculptors were not Jain sculptors and Hindu sculptors. They were just sculptors, and they would, depending on whoever commissioned or sponsored a sculpture, they would go ahead and do it. So if you're a Hindu sculptor who's just finished a Hindu monument or a Hindu sculpture with, 16 arms and multiple weapons and things like that, and then you're told, just give me this, what do? You sort of look at how can you embellish everything around the Jina and leave the Jina itself alone as described in the text, right? So you add yakshas and yakshis, you have some anointing elephants, and then you add what is known as the parikara. Parikara is attendants or the retinue of the Jina, and in this retinue you can add pretty much everything. You can add Navagrahas, as in this case, you can add other Jinas, you can add celestial animals, and so on and so forth. So one particularly popular parikara is to have the main Jina here and the 23 other Jinas around them. So this is called a Chaubisi or Chaturvimshati Patta. Chaturvimshati simply being 24. So you can see everything. You can see Devadundubi, the Vriksha, the Vidyadharas, and here you can see the Bhamandala, the aura or the halo around it. Right? So let's cut to the chase. So this is all the stuff that you can show in a Tirthankara idol, right? This is how in the representation. So at the top, you can see that these are this Chaubisi Pata. You can see the Devadundubi, in fact, it's actually being played by a drummer. There are the Trichatras. There is the Kaivalya Vriksha, which is in a stylized form. There is the Bhamandala, which is in the form of a lotus behind. And then there are anointing elephants. There are Vidyadharas with garlands. There are Indras with chamaras. There is a Simhasana. And then we have the carpet. And then we have the Dharma Chakra in the middle of the Simhasana. You have Yaksha here and the Yakshi here, who are attached to the, who are assigned to the Tirthankara. And finally, you have the Lanchana. Lanchana is a symbol, as we will see, to differentiate one Tirthankara from another, because in their perfection, they all look alike, right? So this is the sum and substance of all iconography that you can do with the idol of a Tirthankara or a Jina, right? Which brings us to the 24th Tirthankara. There are 24 of them. And if you enter a hall like this, where all 24 are shown, who is who, right? So therefore, somewhere in the 5th, 6th centuries onwards, and then finally settling down in about the 9th century, they had the lanchanas or symbols assigned to each of these. And similarly, at this around the same time, the concept of yakshas and yakshis being attached or assigned to each of the Tirthankaras started. So Rishabhadeva's symbol is the bull, Vardhamanas is the lion, Parshvanatha, we'll see how he is identified, Shantinatha has the deer, and so on and so forth. So let's see a few of them. This is Rishabhanatha or Adinatha, the oldest or the first of the Tirthankaras. Yeah, sorry. His Lanchana is the bull. He's the single most important Tirthankara. It's a very distinguished family. His father, as I said, was the last of the Manus. His son was the first Chakravarti. Another son became his Bahubali. His daughter was Brahmi, who invented writing. And so Rishabhanatha is the first family of Jainism, right? Incidentally, is also mentioned in Hindu text as an Amshavatara, not a full-fledged avatara, but an Amshavatara of Vishnu in several Puranas. Rishabhanatha has the distinction of being the only Jaina who can be shown with long hair. There is a legend around it saying as he was about to remove his hair, the Indras who were there when he had taken Diksha said, no, it is okay to keep your hair and so on. So he's the only Jaina who's allowed to show, who's allowed to be depicted with long hair. Suparsvanatha is one of the Tirthankaras. I'm showing him here because he normally confuses us with the other. He's normally confused with the other Parshvanatha because they both are shown with the hoods, snake hoods at the bottom, the top or behind their heads. But in the case of Suparsvanatha, is often shown without a snake hood, but with a swastika as his lanchana. Shantinatha is a very important and probably in the top 5 kind of situation in the pantheon of Jinas. And his lanchana is a deer, and sometimes that can get confusing because there is a chakra and there'll be 2 deers and it looks like Buddha. But then he is naked. He has you can also see that he will have a Srivatsa symbol and so on. Mallinatha is an interesting character. I mentioned that all Tirthankaras are Kshatriya males, right? Mallinatha is the kind of putative exception to that rule, because in one tradition, in one sampradaya, Mallinatha actually said he was born as a woman, and it was because of certain when practicing penances in his previous birth, there were some shortcomings, and then he was born as a woman. But the Digambaras don't believe that Mallinatha was a woman. They only worship him as a male. However, there is one lone statue in the Lucknow Museum of a Mallinatha in a Digambara kind of form, which is a bit of a mystery. There is a naked Mallinatha with a lovely veni behind her back. And this is how there's a lanchana here. It's a kalasa. You can't see it very clearly. It has been defaced, but it's definitely Mallinatha from around the 9th century. So that is one interesting Tirthankara exception there. Neminatha, as I mentioned, is the cousin of Krishna and Balarama. And in some idols, he's actually depicted. Sorry, this is a poor photo, but you can see this is Balarama with his conch. With his plow. And this is Krishna actually depicted with Shankha Chakra Gada on the side of Mallinatha. Neminatha. Neminatha was a cousin of Krishna, and in the Jain scheme of things, it was Neminatha's advice to Krishna that then became the Bhagavad Gita that was conveyed to Arjuna in the battlefield. Parshvanatha is the most distinctive of the Jinas because of this, the head of the hood of the snake that he has. The hood is normally a 7-hooded snake, mostly in North India. In the South Indian idols, it's sometimes 5, but he is the most easily identifiable. Also, he is because of this date of Mahavira dying within 250 years after Parsva's Nirvana. He's been able to give people have given him a date, but there is no real substantial evidence of his being a historical figure. If he had been, then he would have been the true quote-unquote founder of the faith. Then, of course, there is Mahavira, Jainism is all about him in the current era. And we've already seen some of it there. So what else can a sculptor do? You can put 2 Tirthankaras together and call them Vitirthis. Now here, These are of the same Tirthankara, right? Both are Parshvanathas. You can see the snake behind and the hood here. Or you can put two different Tirthankaras together and create a Tritirthi, or you can have a Tritirthi, and so on. But given the restrictions of what you can show in an icon of the Tirthankara, this is about the extent of variety that you can do. Good. So with that, we have come to the end of the, sorry, not the talk yet. If you permit me, I can go on for another 15 minutes or so. We have seen how the Tirthankaras are worshipped in icons. Let's move on to some of the other Shalaka Purushas. We'll look at Bahubali. Bahubali is an interesting person. Who was Bahubali? I mentioned that he was the son of Rishabhadeva. He was the second son of Rishabhadeva, the eldest being Bharata. Rishabhadeva was the king of Ayodhya, and on his abdication to take Diksha, Bharata was anointed king. And the other pieces of territory that Rishabha had was ruled by his other sons. But Bharata was an ambitious man, and he wanted to become Chakravarti. He eventually did become the first Chakravarti. And so he attacked and subdued all his other brothers except Bahubali. So Bahubali and Rishabha, and Bharata, instead of fighting it out on the battlefield, decided that they were advised that it's only between the two of you. Why do you want to kill so many others in your battle? So why don't you sort it out between just the two of you? And therefore they fought it out in three stages. The first was called Drishti Yuddha, a Yuddha of unflinching gaze, and then there was a Jala Yuddha, in which water combat, and finally in the Malla Yuddha, which is wrestling. And in the first two, Bahubali easily defeated Bharata, and the third was about to, he had about to defeat him. He had carried him up and was about to drop him heavily when he suddenly had a change of mind and said, "What am I doing? This is my brother, and there are higher things in life," and forgave Bharata, and immediately took Diksha and renounced the world. So Bharata became Chakravarti and Bahubali took Diksha, but not the end of story. After years of severe penance, he still did not achieve liberation. And remember, Rishabhadeva had just abdicated and he was there. And so his sisters, namely Brahmi and Sundari, went to Rishabhadeva and asked him, "Father, why is it that Bahubali has not achieved enlightenment?" And then Rishabha told them, "Look, it is because he's still got his ego. He still thinks that he has given up this whole country for the land for his brother, and he's sitting on the land of his brother. He's standing there, and so on. So he's not given up his attachments and his ego." So the sisters, and these are depicted very nicely here in this 10th century statue, also from Devghat. The sisters go to Bahubali, find him completely covered in creepers and plants, which is how he is depicted, and start removing those tenderly. And one of them goes to him and whispers, "Dismount the elephant." Bahubali gets the message. The elephant is of ego, and he understands the message. And in a moment, he drops his ego and he attains Kevala Jnana. And importantly, he does that even before Rishabhadeva. Rishabhadeva, remember, is the first Tirthankara. But Bahubali did not become a Tirthankara because he did not perform the Samavasarana. He is supposed to have left it to his father, who became the Tirthankara, first Tirthankara. Our story doesn't end here. This is the famous Gomateshwara at Shavanabelagola, and the Bahubali idea of giving up the ego continues in legends about this statue as well. So, for example, this statue was put in place by Chavandaraya, who was a general of the Ganga dynasty kings somewhere in the late 10th century. And the sculptor is a man known as Arishtanemi. He made a good deal for himself. He said, "I want to be paid in gold, not in gold, but how much gold? As much as the pieces of rock that are chipped away to form this statue." So he had a great deal going. He became the most important sculptor in the land. And after he received his first set of wages for starting work, he took it home and found that the gold would not leave his hands. It got stuck. And when he went to his guru, Jaina gurus, they said, "Look, it's your ego. You're thinking you're doing this for yourself because you're the greatest sculptor. No, this is for Bahubali, and unless you drop that ego, you will not be able to proceed." And then he did do that and eventually sculpted it. It doesn't end there as well. There's a legend of Chavandaraya's first Abhisheka. Now, having put up this largest statue possibly ever in the land way back in the 10th century, Chavandaraya was justifiably proud. And when he decided he will be the first Abhisheka to this wonderful statue. So when he started pouring the Panchamritam from above, he found that the Panchamritam would not cross the navel and would not descend below that, and it's just stuck there. And he was wondering when Kushmandini, which is a Yakshi and a goddess in the form of an old woman, came and with their humble offering of just plain water and poured it, and that went right down. And Chavandraya was made to realize that he needed to give up his ego before he did this Abhishekam to Bahubali. So Bahubali stands for not just the sacrifice that he did to give up the kingdom and so on, is also the ultimate in terms of giving up the ego in achieving liberation. So that is the story of Bahubali. He is one of the Shalaka Purushas, and that is how he is worshipped. However, because of his exalted status, he is sometimes treated in icons like a Tirthankara. So you have Trichatra, you have Dundubi, you have Vidyadhara, and so on, and Indras and so forth. Though technically you shouldn't have that because he's not a Tirthankara, and only the Tirthankara should have it. But here, of course, since they are both standing with their father, Bharata as a Chakravarti and Bahubali as a are given these privileges of a Tirthankara. We'll now go to Jaina goddesses and maybe spend 10 minutes on them, and then we'll close. So Jaina goddesses are three types. We will see two of them. One is Shruta Devis, which are Saraswati and Lakshmi, and then there is Vidya Devis, the Devis of knowledge, and finally you have Yakshis and Yakshinis. These are in these areas, the celestial devas, you know where they live, Yantaras and Devadevis and so on. They are in the Madhyaloka, right? The earliest Saraswati in India is a Jain Saraswati. It is again from Mathura, it's from Kankalitila. And how do we know it's a Saraswati? There is no guesswork. It simply says so in the inscription here. It's a Kushan inscription from 132 AD. There is a clear document in her hand, a manuscript, and she sits in what is known as the Go Dohika Asana. Go Dohika is the milking of a cow asana, and it is important in Jainism because it is the asana in which Mahavira is supposed to have attained nirvana. So this is Saraswati, the earliest Saraswati that we have explicitly mentioned as Saraswati from 132 AD. Saraswati is considered as Shruta Devati. Shruti being the holy, the words of the lords, the Tirthankara, the teaching of the Tirthankara, just like Shruti means Vedas in the Hindu context. And Saraswati is seen as a personification of the teaching of the Jinas, the Jinavani. Her limbs, her 12 limbs are the Anga texts in the Shvetambara tradition. The 14 are the Purva texts in the Digambara tradition, and so on. And today she is worshipped. There is a special day of worship for her called Jnana Panchami by the Shvetambaras and Shruta Panchami by the Digambaras. And she is worshipped. She has a specific day on which she is worshipped as well. In the early centuries, she is given as much importance because she is Jinavani. She is given as much importance as a Jinas. For instance, this is a sculpture in Devdagad where she is treated almost equal to the Jinas on the same pedestal, on the same platform. And she sits in a Hamsa Vahana. She has Marda Mudra. She has a manuscript in her hand. Sometimes she is shown the Akshamala and a lotus. This is another Saraswati from Devgad as well. Here is a Saraswati from Khajuraho, from the Pasanatha temple there. In one of the Kostas, you can see this is a six-armed Saraswati with the lotus, the manuscript, the Veena, which the other two hands should have been playing the Veena, and then there is a Varda Mudra and a Kamandalu as well. This is a South Indian version. This is from a place near Shimoga. This is again Saraswati. You can see the manuscript. The other hands are mostly broken, and the front hand is broken. She's having a Pasa and an Ankusha in a different version of the Jain goddess. Here is a Saraswati from Mount Abu. Here she has 16 arms and a whole lot of things that she is carrying. There is a Varadaksha Mudra and so on. And there is a document here. The manuscript is here. I told you about the Vidya Devis. There are 16 Vidya Devis. They are the goddesses of knowledge. I don't know of any other religion has 16 goddesses for knowledge. So you can see the importance of knowledge in the Jaina Sampradaya. And sometimes it is shown that Saraswati may have been the head of all these 16 Vidya Devis. And they are, for instance, in this particular image icon, they are represented all along the Toranas of the pillars, the 16 Vidya Devis. And Saraswati is there. There she is with her lotus and the Kamandalu, her Varadakshara and the manuscript. Then we go to Yakshas and Yakshini. These are very interesting beings. If you remember, they were Gantara Devas living in celestial land. They are also known as Sasana Devatas. So what happened was somewhere around the 5th, 6th century onwards, a number of the local deities as well as Hindu goddesses were started to get absorbed into the Jain pantheon. And somewhere in the Gupta period, 5th century onward, they started appearing in sculptures as well. And each of them started getting assigned to a Tirthankara. So both Yakshas and more importantly Yakshis started getting assigned to Tirthankaras, right? And slowly, as Yakshas and Yakshis became important by themselves, they started the cult of their own, and especially the Yakshis or the Yakshinis started having a huge following individually, independent of their respective Tirthankaras. So there are several stories of Yakshis presiding over Tirthas. Ambika is the presiding Yakshi of Girnar, Chakreshwari, Chatranjaya, and so on and so forth. They are known as Shasana Devatas of the Tirthas, but they are the administrators, they are the commanders, or they are called upon to resolve things. And as more and more Tirthas expanded, the number of such pilgrimage centers increased. Yakshis also grew in importance because they were seen as the Shasana Devatas of the Tirthas. The first Yakshi was Ambika. She was associated with all 24 of the Tirthankaras in the beginning, but slowly other Yakshis were brought in onto the picture, and slowly by about 9th century AD, the Yakshis began to be differentiated by the Tirthankaras. Each Tirthankara got a different Yaksha and a different Yakshi. Let us see some of them. Now, what are Yakshis and Yakshas worshipped for, right? So you technically you can't ask the Tirthankara for favors. He is above all this. The Tirthankara, the Jaina he's a liberated soul, right? So if you've got a problem, you can't go ask him to solve it. You can't say, look, Q4 EBITDA is low, do something about it, kind of thing. You can't do that. So the Yakshas and Yakshis perform their duty. So if you wanted a boon, if you wanted good health, if you wanted some of your problems solved, you worship the Yakshas and the Yakshis, right? So the popular Yakshas and Yakshis were Neminata's Yaksha and Yakshi, who was called Sarvakna and Ambika. And then we have Parshvanatha's Yaksha and Yakshi, or Dharanendra and Padmavati. Then we have Rishabha's Yaksha and Yakshi, Gomukha and Chakreshwari, and Vardhamanas, Mahaviras, Matanga and Siddhayini. So let us look at them. Ambika is the earliest. In the Digambara tradition, she is known as Agmila, and her iconography, she rides a lion. She has 4 arms and sometimes 2 arms and so on. She is shown carrying children and a bunch of mangoes, right? Sometimes 2 children and a bunch of mangoes. What's the story behind that? Ambika, the legend of course is a much later legend, but she's the wife of a Brahmin called Somabhatta, and Somabhatta invited some people to his Shraddha ceremony of his father and went out to get some things. Meanwhile, a Jain Muni came to the house, and in Soma's absence, Ambika fed him with food meant for that was cooked for the Brahmins. On his return, Soma was very wild and threw Ambika and the 2 sons out. And Ambika and the 2 sons were helpless, but because she had fed the Jain monk, that punyam worked miracles for them. So a dried mango tree suddenly started yielding fruits to them, and hence the mango in the icon. By this time, Soma had heard the full story, and he came running towards where Ambika was there, but the story didn't have a good end. Ambika thought he was coming to kill them, and therefore she went to hide tried hiding in a well, and both the children and Ambika died. Her husband also died. However, she was reborn as a Yakshi, and her husband was reborn as the lion Vahana, and her sons are her sons. And therefore, Ambika is seen normally with the lion Vahana and the 2 sons and a mango. So one of the earliest Ambika representations is from the Badami. As you know, Karnataka was a big center for Jainism ever since the Digambara Jains came south. The story goes that Chandragupta Maurya himself, along with his Guru Bhadrabahu, led the team of Jinas down south to where Shravanabelagola and those places are, because there was a famine, a 16-year famine that was predicted, and during the famine they came down south and so on. So since then, Jainism has been there quite predominant in both Karnataka, and from there onwards in Tamil Nadu and so on. So Badami's Cave 4 has, in fact, it has a Bahubali as well. I don't have a photo. So the first Ambika, right? So this is Ambika, mango, children. and so on. One of the earliest Ambikas. There's another Ambika in the Meguti Jain temple now in Aihole in the same region of Badami. One of the earliest. This is again a late 7th century icon as well. So this is a typical Ambika, children, the mango tree, and the rest of the Vahana, the lion Vahana, and so on. In the South Indian tradition, there are also Utsava Murtis of Ambika. So this is for example, this is an Ambika with the Neminada on the crown, on her Makutam. She's wearing Makara Kundala, she wears Yajnopavitas and so on. So the Tamil tradition of Ambika, and here is the lion Lanchana as well, Vahana as well. So the Tamil tradition of Jaina worship included Utsava Murtis as well. Next we go to Padmavati. Padmavati and Dharanendra were the Yaksha and Yakshi of Parshvanatha. They are easily identified because they are Nagas, and therefore what happened was in his previous birth, before the birth as Parshvanatha, a non-believer was cutting a tree for Yagna, and Parshvanatha went and requested them not to cut the tree because there were some snakes living on the tree. But the Brahmana who was cutting the tree cut the tree, and with it they killed the snakes. Parshvanatha restored them to life, and they were reborn as Dharanendra and Padmavati as Nagas in the Patala Loka. So there is a tradition of Naga worship which was incorporated into the Parshvanatha story, and from about the 9th century onwards, Padmavati is Parshvanatha's Yakshi. It's interesting because Padmavati is not listed among the original literature as the queen of Dharanendra. That was somebody called Vairotya, but the Padmavati cult kept growing fairly rapidly, and therefore Dharanendra's wife was renamed as Padmavati. Easily identified, Padmavati is normally the one with the staff that ends in the snakes of the snake coils of the snake of Parshvanatha. So there she is holding a staff. There the coils of Parshvanatha. This is an interesting statue. You can see that this is not the head of Parshvanatha because there is no snake there, but this is the body of Parshvanatha. This is Yakshi Padmavati. She's shown everywhere 4-armed, and sometimes she's shown as 12-armed. But the keen thing that you have to note is the hood behind her. Here is a Padmavati in all her regal splendor. South Indian Padmavati from Tirupati Kundram. The Padmavati, you can see her crown and this is Dharanendra as well. Next is Chakraveshwari. She is the Yakshi of Rishabhanatha. Remember, Rishabhanatha himself in the Hindu tradition is an Amshavatara of Vishnu, and Chakraveshwari therefore comes from the Vaishnavite pantheon. Her Vahana is Garuda, and here she is holding the 2 chakras, sometimes 1 chakra, but more often represented like this. These are full-fledged goddesses, depicted in the full-fledged Hindu kind of fashion. There are no restrictions like the Jinas have, and therefore, in full splendor, she is there. She is holding chakras. And here is Garuda, her Vahana. Right? Here is Garuda, her Vahana. There's another Chakreshwari. There is an 8-armed Chakreshwari, and so on. And finally, we come to the Siddhayini, who is the Yakshi of Mahavira. We can see a South Indian version of her with 12 arms, and so on. So those are the Yakshas and Yakshis, mainly from the Hindu pantheon as well as local beliefs that they were incorporated. In fact, there is a very interesting typology of taxonomy of Hindu goddesses that Eka Ramanujan makes. He talks of all goddesses as breast mothers and tooth mothers, the consort goddess and the Ammans. The breast mothers are married to the male consort like Vishnu or Shiva. They are auspicious. They are associated with auspicious life cycle rituals. They are household deities well within the house. They are sculpted faces and images, very beautiful. They are not born of the earth. They are pure, chaste. They are benevolent. They are vegetarian, and they have Brahmana temples. The Ammans, on the other hand, or the truth mothers, are basically alone. They are very often not married. They are more a crisis deity rather than a household deity. There are life cycle crises like epidemics, famines, and so on. You invoke them to either solve it or to prevent them. The temples are often outside village boundaries, and they are sometimes ambivalent. They are not are shown as harmful to children. So therefore, there is a whole thinking that the whole Jaina goddess were all started off because in the Jaina pantheon there is ahimsa. They cannot be overly malevolent. They can only be benevolent, and therefore some of the truth mothers of Hinduism got adopted as pest mothers, as between the two models somewhere, and became yakshas and yakshinis of Jaina goddesses. We do one final piece on Samavasarana. I remember I told you about this 5 Kalyanakas, and the last one, before he becomes a Tirthankara, a Jaina becomes a Samavasarana, performs the Samavasarana, where he is worshipped. So this is again from Tirupati Kundram. This is the Samavasarana of Rishabhanatha, and this is an extremely well-defined, as in well-structured and well-defined as in all items of Jaina philosophy and worship. So there are multiple bhumis, and they are represented in this Samavasarana. There are one bhumi entirely of Upavana, which is fruit trees, a Valli bhumi with creepers. There is a Kartika bhumi with which is a water world. There's a Dvaja bhumi with only flags. There is a Vriksha bhumi, a Bhavana bhumi, and so on and so forth. So these are the ways in which you enter this Samavasarana, which is, remember, is the first sermon to be in which the Jaina, freshly minted Tirthankara, is going to preach. And he is shown as facing all 4 sides. And with all the, before that, last week, those of you who attended the Seva presentation talk by V.K. Srinivasan, you have remembered Sittannavasal is just this one bhumi of the Samavasarana. The paintings are of the Kartika bhumi, which is the water world. So in the Samavasarana, there are extraordinary number of areas or regions, and each of them for all those different types of beings that we saw early on in the universe, the Bhavanavasis, the Vyantaras, the Jyotishkas, the Kalpavasis, and so on and so forth, Chakravartis, there are nuns, and so on. And the 8 Ashtamaha Pratiharyas are there, the Karpa Vriksha, the Trachatra, the Bhamandala, and so forth. So Samavasarana is an extraordinarily important event in the aspect in the life of a Tirthankara. And now, instead of just art, we have temples where it is sort of depicted in a 3-dimensional form. Here is the 4-side facing Jaina, facing all 4 sides. And here are all those bhumis where various beings and various mangalas are all present. So that is something that you can also see. Sometimes it is just a table inside a Jain temple. You will find the 3-dimensional depiction of Samavasarana. Sometimes it is an entire room or temple like this, shrine by itself. So that brings us to the end of this wonderful world of Jaina worship. These are some of the things that we saw: the Triloka, the Lohanipur torso, the Jivanta Pratima, all the Ashtamaha Pratiharyas, Bahubali. We saw first Saraswati. We have seen the Samavasarana, and we have seen Chakreshwari, and so on. So thank you very much for your patience. I don't know if we have time to take questions. If there are, you can do so. Otherwise, thank you very much and good night.
Shyam, I think we can take a couple of questions if they are. Okay?
Yeah, I'm not watching this on YouTube, so I can't see the questions. So if you read out the
questions. No questions asked yet. I just posted that they can ask. Yep. If they do, I'll pass it on to you.
Yep, so I can wait.
And but right now there's a whole bunch of compliments, so I can read out some while we're waiting for the questions if you'd like. Picture is worth 1,000 words. Thanks for awesome pictures. Excellent exposition by Mr. Kanaka Ajitadas. Major Narayanan RV say wonderful presentation, interesting visuals, and so on. And Rajaram also, VKS also, most comprehensive presentation. Wonderful presentation of Jainism. I'll wholeheartedly endorse all of these comments.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. And everybody for their nice.
Shyam, thanks a lot. It was so very, we could learn so much. And it was absolutely informative. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye then. Good night.
Okay, no questions forthcoming. So I think, or I can't see them anyway. So just more thank yous, and I like the snake and ladders kind of stuff. So
Okay, I think it's quite long. So
I think overwhelmed with information. So no questions at this point. Okay, it's been long. It's 8:30, 1.5 hours. So perhaps we can terminate. Srimati?
Yeah, I guess if people have questions, they should. But then the whole explanation was so good. I don't think anybody would have had anything to
Yeah,
ask. He's covered
exactly.
everything.
Exactly.
okay then, I'll
All
sign
right.
off then. Thank you so
Very
much.
good.
Thanks Gopu, thanks Srimati and Anu for the technical help. Thank you so much. Good night.
Yeah, bye. Good night.
Bye. Good night. And I don't know how to end the YouTube service. That's still live.